It's 8:15, and want to thank everybody for tuning in. I want to thank Harry Rausch for being on last Thursday night, Dr. Rausch with his wife, Lenore. It's wonderful to look around. I even get to see my wife from a distance. She's in Chicago. So
hello.
Bottom line, it's great to look at a full screen and see familiar faces. The presenter tonight is familiar to many of us in that Jacob and his wife Nicole have been regulars with their 4 children to many of our Shabbat services and prayer song, regulars in activity, but not everybody knows Jacob and that he is younger than many on the screen and relatively newer to the congregation than many on the screen. And in fact, I picked this time at 8:15 to enable a broader range of people to join us. So in that regard, I'm delighted that Jacob has agreed to talk tonight about leading through change and adversity, which is the area in which he has become well known nationally, both as a coach and a trainer for major companies, as well as a motivational speaker, and of a new book that is called See Change Clearly, that's doing well on Amazon as a business book. And Jacob's focus is on managing adversity. And in that light, he at the moment is a consultant to cities and small and local governments across the country. So we'll talk a little bit about that piece, about how he's working with COVID-19 and also how his tools that he's developed over the years apply to his own family at this time. But because many of us don't know Jacob well, I invite Jacob to first introduce himself and talk about how you became focused on managing adversity.
Yeah, thank you so much, Rabbi. Thanks for having me. This is very exciting. I'm really humbled to be on the conversation here. And I want to just, before we start, I want to thank you because the amount of content that you and the team at CBI have been putting out has made connecting with our shul family a lot easier. And it's painfully difficult for my family to be missing Friday and Saturdays with you. I saw Carl on there. I saw Rabbi Robin on there. Hello, hello. It's been very difficult for us to not have that in-person connection, but the amount of content that you're putting out daily, the amount of opportunities that we have to learn in different ways, I very much appreciate it. My family appreciates, and a big special thanks to you and Amy and Carl and Robin for the live streaming on Fridays and Saturdays. That's been very helpful to my kids, my family, and so I thank you. And I thank everyone for tuning in. This is great to have a conversation with a group. I don't usually get to speak to a group that I know and I'm familiar with, and I feel very comfortable like I'm speaking to family, and my mom and dad are listening too. So hello to them as well. So yeah, so in terms of how I got started in this, I've always had an interest in public safety and government, but really my story of adversity started just in a nutshell when I went off to college. And I had a college job as a Berkeley guide, helping kind of create a friendly environment in downtown Berkeley. And one night I walked into a subway station and there was 2 subway workers that were being attacked by a subject. And I intervened, and the gentleman ended up coming out of the ticket booth and assaulted me and struck me 6 or 7 times in the side of the head with a small collapsible metal object. And that was lights out. And I had to drop out of college and go through over 2.5, almost 3 years of full-time rehabilitation to learn all different types of things all over again. And that was really my focus in that period of time. Was I wanted to figure out a way to make sure that rehabilitation process did not go to waste, that I could take the lessons that I learned in that process and in the future do something with it. And so that sort of changed my whole path and trajectory. And I ended up in the field of emergency management, public safety, and crisis management. and ultimately working my way up in city government into the city management office and working in city management, and trying to figure out ways to help others deal with crisis and change. And then I started my own company helping the private sector and public sector throughout the country deal with change and challenge.
And what are some tools that you developed as a result of that process recovery?
Yeah, so the internet was cutting out a little bit. I don't know if it's on my side or your side, but I think you asked about what are some of the tools that came out of that process.
Yes.
Yeah. So there a lot of them, right? So in the public sector and in the private sector for companies and organizations, I really focus on helping those organizations create very strong, diverse teams with lots of different backgrounds and different perspectives and paradigms that, once brought together, create a very high level of cognitive diversity that allow you to face change and challenge effectively. And then when it comes to sort of my own life and helping people and my clients deal with their own professional or personal change and challenge, there's lots of different strategies. And I can go through a few of these. I know we're kind of going all around, but maybe, Rabbi, I could start with, some of the things that I'll start with personally, actually, first, some of the tools and resources. Some of them that are really applicable to me right now with my own family, because we have 4 beautiful kids, 12, 10, 8 and 4 and 5. And Clara just had her 10th birthday last week in isolation here. We've been in lockdown for about 3 weeks now. And it's been stressful. It's been really challenging. I know there's some other families that are listening to this, and I'll start with sort of talking about some of the tools that I've been able to apply to my family environment that I talk about. The first one is, in this time of crisis and change, we're very internally focused. It's our natural instinct to figure out how we can survive. This is the same for organizations as it is for our personal life and family life. And so at some point in crisis, we have to go from focusing on toilet paper and canned goods and rice to figuring out how we can start to bring purpose back into our life. I'm a big fan of Dr. Viktor Frankl. Every keynote that I give focuses on man's search for meaning and Dr. Viktor Frankl. And what he says is, life is never made unbearable by circumstances, but only by lack of meaning and purpose. And so the more that we can figure out ways each day to do something externally, figure out some way to create some sort of impact on the outside, the better we can stay focused and grounded and have a sense of fulfillment in these days in which we feel like our purpose is questionable. And so many things are changing in the world around us. So for example, in my family life, for my kids, it's about one activity a day to focus on writing cards or making a phone call or making sure they're Skyping friends or others, or just really tuning outward and seeing where they can still have the ability to make impact. So that's number one, is figuring out how to face outward in this time where we're all faced so much in seclusion inward. Second, I would say, is what I learned in rehabilitation is the importance of baby steps. In the rehabilitation process, I was in speech therapy, physical therapy, occupational therapy, 5 days a week, very intensive, 2.5, 3 years. And in that process, I learned that you can't do everything, but you can try anything. And the way to try anything is to start simple and to start with baby steps. And so we get very overwhelmed with all the things that we need to make sure that we need to do. And what we do in our family is try to break that down into, let's just see if we can accomplish one thing for the day and give ourselves a little bit of success to get to the next day. And with that, the third strategy that we employ in the companies that I work with and in my own family, personal life, is what I call do-over days. And that means that as humans, we have such pressure on ourselves to make sure that every day is carpe diem and live to the fullest and super successful and amazing. That's just not the reality. The reality is some days are terrible and some days are flops. And what Nicole and I, my wife, what we do at the end of one of those days, we say, you know what? How about we have an agreement? This is a do-over day. This is a do-over day. We have to kind of wash our hands and say, you know what? We tried, didn't work, wasn't great. Tomorrow's anew. And we literally label it a do-over day. And that sort of takes and relieves the pressure off of making sure that every single day we're doing just perfectly. And in these challenging circumstances, when the rules have changed and everything is new and different, we need to be able to be good to ourselves and give ourselves a big pack of do-over days so that we can learn and keep moving forward. So those are just a couple of the strategies that we've been looking at.
So you're consulting with local governments in regard to COVID-19.
Yeah.
Talk a little bit about who your clients are and what you bring to them.
Yeah. So it's kind of interesting. I wear a lot of different hats, but one of the hats that I wear is I help in the emergency management world. So for my company, we have about 550 employees throughout the Western states here and about 1,800 employees throughout the country. I'm managing what's called our Emergency Operations Center, which is so for our whole company, managing the response for all of our employees that are having their hours cut back and having their work environments changed, because our company consults and supports cities, and we provide different municipal services. So I'm helping our company manage our own company response to the COVID-19 situation. And then also I'm working with cities throughout mainly California and helping them set up virtual emergency operation centers where all of their city employees that are in leadership positions come into a virtual environment just like this over Zoom, and they manage what's happening in their community, how many COVID-19 outbreaks they're having, how to get resources and supplies, how to communicate with the public. And so I'm doing, myself and my team are working with communities mainly throughout California to help them succeed in this period of time with COVID-19. So that's sort of my emergency management public safety hat that I wear.
What has surprised you about this crisis compared to others that you've handled? How would you put this in perspective?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I've actually worked on both local, for the last 20 years, I've managed lots of different disasters, wildfires, storms, floods. I even went to Christchurch and spent 2 weeks with the International City Managers Association after the Christchurch earthquake, working on their recovery and trying to learn and take back as much as I could to the United States. And I was in executive positions in fire departments and police departments in my career in local government. So have managed a lot of different situations, and this is absolutely unprecedented. There are some interesting things that I'm learning. We're right now in my company, we're on day 19 of round-the-clock, 24-hour emergency operations center or virtual emergency operations center environment. So managing all these different factors and situations. And what I've realized is that when we're all in one room together and we're not physically distant, we can take care of each other's food and break needs and mental health needs a lot easier. When we're all at home and we're in lockdown and we're using Zoom and all these computer screens and all these computer programs to manage things, my team members, our people are putting in 18-hour days, and I'm not as in touch with the stressors that they're going through and dealing with on their family side. So we had to really take a time out about 5 or 6 days ago and think about ways when you were all in the same room together, there was always somebody assigned in every disaster to look out for your breakfast, for your lunch, for your dinner. Are you taking breaks? Are you drinking? Now we're all at home and we're isolated. We're on these screens. No one's looking out for these needs. So we created like a virtual dinner experience where we had dinner delivered to all of our team members that were working, and we took pictures and photos, and we had a dog day where we all brought our dogs on camera, and just trying to think of new and different ways to make sure that people were being taken care of when you're not in close proximity at the workplace. So that's been a really big shift for us to try to look out for each other when the traditional ways that we do that are not available. I think also what I've been able to experience is the absolute best in people, the ingenuity, the innovativeness. We never had a virtual emergency operations center, didn't even know what that term was. Before, we all put on our vests, went into a room together, had surrounded by screens and $1 million of equipment, and we could manage the disaster. On March 12th, we had to decide how we're going to manage a disaster by being all separated throughout the country. And so this team of incredible individuals that we were from our company that we assembled created this virtual emergency operations center environment. And I think it's done just as good of a job at managing all the information coming in and making sure we can make all the decisions. So I've been really inspired by people's ability to think really big out of the box and solve a lot of problems that we've never faced before. So that really fuels me up and keeps me going. And in COVID-19, one of the other strategies that I think we've tried to employ is something that works for, I think, your family too, is in this long duration incident, because this is not like an earthquake where it's sudden and we have a day or two of aftershocks or situations. This is a long duration event. You in the leadership position or a family as a parent, you have to think of ways to celebrate the little wins and the victories, because you need to keep gas in that tank for a very long period of time. Let's not wait till COVID-19 is over to celebrate what we're accomplishing as a people and as a community and as teams and as organizations. Let's make sure as leaders and family members and parents that every day we're recognizing in our kids the very small victories. We're trying to really pay attention to the little things that my kids are accomplishing. They're doing 45 minutes of school now instead of 6 hours of school. And we're trying to really hone in on what they're accomplishing in that 45 minutes and give them credit and recognition and recognize them for the little activities and the things so they can get through this very long duration of time.
Can you say a little bit more about what cities in California rely on you for?
Yeah, good question. So I'm sort of wearing two hats right now in the cities that I work with. Number one, my team and I were helping them set up the virtual emergency operations center that we've set up for our company. So we've kind of got this whole package, which includes a dashboard of data and information and kind of like we use Microsoft Teams as a way to communicate with each other and set up chat rooms and video Skyping and sort of this whole emergency management package that we're giving to cities right now. And we're helping them. So when they're getting isolated and then they're put in quarantine and they're working remotely, they can still manage their city. So that's one hat. The other hat that I'm helping cities with is recovery. I've been through a lot of the disaster recovery processes in my tenure and my experience. And there's a lot of rules and laws and regulations about how cities can get money, what kinds of things cities can request for reimbursement, how they can use people and resources. And this COVID-19 is unprecedented in terms of the amount of laws that are being modified and changed to allow cities to take actions to support all of us in our communities. So I'm advising them and consulting with them and helping them navigate and sift through the things they need to do to be most successful, to get the most money possible at the end of the day.
Can you give an example of some of those laws that have been changed in this moment?
Oh, it's incredible. I mean, I'll give you one that's just kind of blown my mind. Is in California, we operate under something called the Brown Act. And the Brown Act dictates for us in local government, it dictates the way we conduct meetings. And it's extremely rigid and strict about public access and how you have to notice these meetings and have everybody in the same place for meetings and access. And all of a sudden, how do you conduct a city council meeting when you have physical distancing requirements but you have laws stating the type of accessibility that people need to have in the same room with each other? And so the governor very wisely made modifications to the government code to change the types of laws and requirements as to how you conduct city council meetings and how you conduct public meetings. I mean, this has never been done in history. These are incredible things that are changing all the doctrine that have been drilled in us for many, many years about the way in which we conduct the public's business. And so I'm really grateful, actually, that our governments have been so agile and so willing to make so many modifications and changes, but so many of us are trying to keep up on a day-to-day basis on how things are changing. And it's quite a process and a burden for our city managers and for our city officials to every single day comb through all this guidance and make sure that they're able to provide services to the best extent possible.
I did get a text that came up, and we're just going to talk for a few more minutes, and then we're going to open it up for people to ask Jacob some questions. But I did see one question pop up, and that is, does your company serve, and you serve, cities outside of California? And I'm going to add to that question, how do you find it's the same or different when you leave California in the work you do?
Yeah, it's really interesting. So our company serves about 200 cities in California, maybe 20 counties, some special districts. And then we serve a lot of, we have some entities in Colorado, Arizona, Nevada. And then our broader company serves cities throughout the United States that we're dealing with and supporting right now. I would say what's really interesting is, and something that you should know, is that while the states come out with a lot of executive orders, and each state is different, and each state comes out with some different guidance, every county then interprets that guidance a little bit differently and comes out with their own orders. And then every city has the ability under local control to try to figure out how they're going to interpret and implement those orders and regulations. And so every community is different. Every community is trying to look out for the specific needs of their specific organization and their residents and their businesses and their visitors. And what we're seeing is it's very difficult because across the country and even California, everybody is doing things a little bit differently. Some of the orders that came out of the Bay Area yesterday and some of the 6 counties out in the Bay Area in terms of shutting down residential construction, very different than Central California and most of Southern California. So we're really having to support our clients, and our team members are trying to deal with these changing conditions city to city. I'm hoping that we get more and more standardized as we go on throughout the country, so that, as you've said, Rabbi, many times, that we conform to some of these practices, these very difficult practices, as soon as possible, as aggressively as possible, so we can be out of this on the other side in recovery as soon as possible as well.
Thank you, Jacob. So now's an opportunity for about 15 minutes for people to join the conversation by asking Jacob some questions. Linda?
How did you know?
You lit up.
I did.
Right.
Okay. I have a question, Jacob, about, you mentioned that in forming teams, this was a little bit earlier when you were talking about the rehab and then the shift from there, that you found it was important to have cognitive diversity. Yeah. Can you describe what you mean by cognitive diversity and how it enhances, like how it might enhance the synagogue or any community group?
I love it. Thank you, Linda. I love this stuff. So this is going to be great. So a lot of this research comes out of an article called Teams Solve Problems Faster When They're Cognitively Diverse, out of the Harvard Business Review by Reynolds and Lewis. And basically what they were trying to figure out is what teams throughout the world are the best at dealing with change and challenge. And so they brought these groups together and they studied them and they gave them different conditions and they changed the rules on them. And they wanted to see who is the best at solving these difficult challenges and dealing with crisis, right? And what they found is there was no correlation between the team's ability to solve problems and deal with change and diversity in the way that we think about it: race, religion, sexual orientation, gender. There was no correlation. Those things help build a rich culture, a rich workplace culture, but they didn't impact a team's ability to solve challenges. What they found is that teams that had the highest level of cognitive diversity, meaning they brought different viewpoints, different perspective, different ways of thinking. They brought all of their authentic selves to the table. And I talk a lot about bringing your disabilities to the table as a great tool to increase team cognitive diversity. Those teams were the best at facing change and challenge. I learned this in rehab. I couldn't get better after my brain injury if I had just spent my entire time with a speech therapist. I needed a really diverse group of people that thought differently and weren't afraid to tell me when my own perspective or paradigm was off, and who were willing to kind of debate and bring a rich diversity into that environment. And so, unfortunately, when I ask audiences or teams or companies, how many of you think your teams, your executive teams, are really cognitively diverse? Everybody raises their hand. Oh yeah, we're really cognitively diverse. Yeah. The reality is our teams have very low cognitive diversity. Why? Because we hire and assemble teams for fit, for people that we're most comfortable with, for people who we think would be a good fit on our team. But that decreases the ability of the team to be cognitively diverse. And so how it plays in COVID-19 is these are really complex, difficult challenges. We need to make sure we're bringing together lots of dissenting opinions, lots of different perspectives to solve these challenges. You see this at the federal level, the state level, the local level. We got to make sure that our politicians are bringing together people that think really differently and aren't afraid to be critical of the decisions that we're making. And in our synagogue community, it's the same way. When we're looking at our programs, when we're looking at our offerings, when we're looking at the way in which we're doing business, we have to make sure that we have a cognitively diverse group of people that are making those decisions on our behalf. And we have great cognitive diversity, I think, in our shul and our synagogue, but we have to keep making that a priority as we move forward and as we deal with these difficult challenges. Thank you, Linda. I didn't even pay you $20 for that great question. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Okay, this is like Hollywood Squares, you know, all the little pictures. Who would like to ask another question? You can, you know, unmute yourselves just by touching your.
I see some chat room questions. I see some chat room questions.
Chat. Yeah.
Okay, go ahead, Mimi.
No, there are questions on chat.
Okay, so
Jacob sees them.
all right, so we can take a peek here.
Yeah, I can.
I asked the first one. What's your sense, Jacob, as being somebody intimately involved with COVID-19, as to its duration?
Yeah, this is really tough. I mean, every day we have this heat map, and every single day we're tracking all the numbers, all the cases, all the exposures for the cities and counties and areas that we're serving. And if I had the answer to that, I would be consulting on a much more, you know, international, worldly level, right? The only thing that I can say is when the superintendent of schools, you know, yesterday announced that California schools will be canceled for the rest of the school year, I think that should start to guide a little bit of our understanding of how the experts and public health officials, which I am not, are starting to view the duration of COVID-19. I think, as you have said, Rabbi, and so many of the experts have said over the last couple of weeks, it depends how fast we're willing to isolate and lock down into quarantine and how fast we're willing to do that as a country. And so, you know, just by the very fact that the schools have been canceled throughout the year, I'm anticipating for my family, and I'm preparing for my family, that this means that we'll be in a level of quarantine for certainly the rest of the school year. But I'm nobody that I have seen that can predict this or be an expert. But, you know, I think all the modeling looks like they're talking about peaks in the local area and somewhere in mid to late April. That seems pretty consistent across the board, but we got a long runway to go here in terms of just cases and recovery of cases. So, you know, I'm certainly preparing my family for 90 days, the next 90 days of this kind of environment. And it's not happy or nice to say, but I'd rather be pleasantly surprised by an early end. But it depends on how fast we're willing to get on this train and all work together to lock down.
In that regard, two follow-ups, Jacob. One is, how would you have us think about the end in terms of getting our mind around clarity of expectations? And in that regard, how do you prepare your children for 90 more days of 45 minutes a day of homework?
Yeah, that's such good questions. Okay, so number one of the strategies that I'm doing for myself right now is journaling on the daily lessons that I'm learning in this very new experience. So this is my way of hoping that when this is over, that I take the same approach I did with my brain injury. I sat on the end of my Murphy bed, and my parents who are listening right now, they're logged in, they know exactly what I'm talking about. I sat on the end of my little Murphy bed in my 800 square foot apartment next to my rehabilitation facility, and I just hoped that one day I could use those lessons to make some sort of a positive impact and do something good. I'm tapping into that same mantra today, which is every day I hope right now that COVID-19 is teaching me something that I can use for the betterment of my family, my friends, and my professional development. So number one, I think it's about not seeing this period of time as a waste, not seeing this period of time as something to just get through, but try to find a little bit of meaning and purpose, in the words of Dr. Viktor Frankl, in this excruciatingly painful period. And then how do I help my children prepare for that? I think Dr. Roche, is that how you pronounce it. I think Dr. Roche said,
Roush. Yeah.
Roush, I'm very sorry. Dr. Roush said very effectively on your podcast or interview last week, I think you meet the child where they are. That, thank you to him very much. That seems to have worked very well in my family. You meet them where they are. And for my age range, I'm providing more information to the older kids about duration, much less, and giving, making sure I'm not overwhelming Noah and Ella as much with some of that information. So trying to just give them enough to answer their questions and move on to the structure and daily activities. I don't know how we're going to get through 90 days of homeschool, because that was not that was not our choice, but we'll figure that out.
So Sandra asks, what guidance might you have for people who are in this period living alone in terms of coping?
Yeah, that is such a great question, and my heart is out to you and so many others on this situation. Yesterday, I got a call from a very good buddy of mine who, it's funny, he said, I had no interest in reading your book until yesterday, but I finally picked it up. I've had it for 4 or 5 months, never was interested, sorry, Jacob, in reading it, but needed some strategies yesterday, and he picked it up. And he's in that similar situation. He's living alone. Number one, he had to jump in his car and get on the road. And in my rehabilitation experience, I talk about this in my book. When I was in a very dark place, very, very dark, I would jump in my car at 10 o'clock at night and I would drive, because I would see other people out there on the road. And for me, it gave me a certain level of comfort to actually see other human beings out there and be on the road. We've been taking a lot of walks, and there are a whole heck of a lot of people out there. I think trying to immerse ourselves in as much visual encounters and being with the outside world as possible is of benefit. And then potentially figuring out how you can actually be of value to others. So when you're feeling isolated and when you're feeling like you're in need of a lot of nourishment and replenishment and support, that's the time actually to figure out how you can provide that for others. So picking up the phone and seeing and just checking on a few people and seeing what they need, how their day was, what they're going through, taking the focus off the self when we start to get into that place of sort of spiraling, which I have been through in many months in those 2.5 years of my own rehab and isolation. And so those are the things that help me. I don't think there's any magic answer, allowing yourself to feel some of those challenges, but then as soon as possible, trying to figure out how to provide value externally.
Barbara had asked earlier, when you described the Brown Act changes, is that temporary or is that indefinite?
Great question. Typically, in all of the declarations and all of the orders, there's language to the effect of until the conditions cease. So oftentimes the local emergencies are ratified every 10 days or on a regular basis, and they always say this will remain into effect until the conditions cease to exist. So I would very much assume that much of this will change, and the laws will go back to the government code will change back when this change. But interestingly, a lot of us are trying to figure out how many of these conditions and situations like remote work will stay, will be more of a societal norm, and will be more of a future focus. And so some of the laws and rules and regulations, we're looking at that as well as to what will have longevity as a result of COVID-19. So great question. You must be in local government to ask that question or somehow related, but thank you for that.
So I see Lindy is on the screen. Lindy is in New York City. She noted in her comments that, schools have also been canceled in New York. But my wife and I have a son, I was telling you earlier, Jacob, who's doing emergency medicine in New York. And it's a storm that is very, very stormy in ways that we here in California aren't quite feeling the fierceness of COVID-19. What do you want to say to us who are in California, still where it's not immediate for us, at least in the way it is in New York and in other places?
Gosh, I would probably have to call you my rabbi and ask you for that insight. I think we can, again, I always go back to Dr. Viktor Frankl. One of the lines that I love best from his book is, forces beyond your control can take away everything you possess except for one thing: the freedom to choose how you'll respond to the situation. And at the end of the day, in this kind of situation, in this kind of environment, we really only have the ability to choose how we're going to respond. And we have to honor the fact that we're going to cry and that we're going to be scared and that we're going to have fear and anxiety, but we can also choose to figure out how we're going to create some meaning and purpose and value and impact. And so I would say that obsessing or focusing on all the trauma and drama of all the suffering that's going on in the world, we have to recognize it. And then at the end of the day, choose what we're going to be grateful for and choose how we can make some positive impact. My parents who are listening right now, they have a neighbor who, not a profession, but they got a donation from Joanne's Fabric, and they're sitting at home sewing and making homemade masks for the public health workers in the environment. Incredible, right? To create that level of value and impact from your own home, one sewing machine. Lots of YouTube videos out there about how to do that. So, that's all I can offer on that. Back to Linda's question, Rabbi, if you don't mind, just one other tidbit, just so
Sure.
I can identify and relate. I had said, I sat on that Murphy bed and I tried to make some purpose there. When things got really bad and I was questioning whether or not to move forward in my own life, my mentor called me and he said, you need to go out there and do some community service. And I said, I'm a full-time patient. What are you talking about, community service? What can I do? He said, tomorrow morning, you call the local county food bank and you do some community service. Are you kidding me? And so but I believed him. So I did. The next morning, I made the phone call. I ended up working a turkey hotline for Thanksgiving, figuring out how to do it. At first, I sent turkeys to vegetarians all throughout California because I was miserable at the turkey hotline. But I figured out, using some of my strategies and my speech therapist and occupational therapist, how to do it. And ultimately, just being in service to others fueled my ability to get through rehabilitation. Mm-hmm. And so I just wanted to share that to Linda and others that were asking that question, that I really do feel like there's some tremendous value in figuring out any way that we can face outward in these very challenging times.
We still have 5 minutes. Rabbi Robin?
Hi, Jacob. It's good to see you. Please.
We miss you. We miss you.
I miss you guys too. Hug your kids for me and Nicole too.
Yeah.
I'm wondering, in your whole life and after your brain injury and through your recovery, how your Judaism, how your faith played a part in your recovery and in the work that you do now. And I just want to make an asterisk that some of my B'nai Mitzvah kids are doing as a mitzvah project, making the masks with fabric.
Wow.
So proud of them for doing that. And it's a great project. So how does Judaism and your understanding of Judaism and faith play into how you run your life and your family's life?
Thank you, Rabbi Robin. And thank you for creating a virtual community, a religious school community for my kids right now, because it's fueling them and helping them going, and they all miss you very much. But I appreciate all the energy and effort that you're putting into to helping, giving them some continuity and some balance and stability along with Carl. I mean, it's amazing, and Helene and what all of your staff are doing. Yeah, I do get asked this question, believe it or not. This comes up a lot. And I find it fascinating because my sense of God is a very personal one. And I don't know, for me, I just always felt a strong sense of my Judaism. It was how I could keep ritual going and routine going, which is so important nowadays. That's what temple provides for me and my family. So the more ritual and schedule and showering in the morning and putting on deodorant and putting on a dress shirt for a podcast and doing all these routine things really helps. It helps me reconnect, and my sense of a greater power is just something that has stayed strong throughout. I think it's a very personal thing. I think it's very normal to question God's presence or God's participation or role in these things. I don't have any of those answers. I'm not the rabbi in the room on this one for sure. But for me, it has given me a level of strength. My wife is a meditation teacher, and going into some meditation and some reflection and to looking outside the self for some guidance and strength has been helpful. But I think to each their own in that sense. And I think this is a time where we should be having more discussions and asking each other more questions about this very subject, because I think it'd help a lot of us who are struggling right now to believe in different things and struggling with our own Judaism and connection and sense of God and higher power. So I think it's wonderful that you're asking those questions and helping us have some of those conversations right now.
We have one question.
Go ahead, Catherine and John.
Thank you. So it's John. Jacob, my question is about how is it our country just never prepared? I mean, this was obviously happening. I was in Wuhan in early January when I left. We were, screened in Hong Kong. Everybody all over Asia knew this was happening. This was going to be a pandemic. When I got home in the US, I asked everybody in my family to buy masks, and this was the middle of January. And so everybody knew this was happening, but somehow our country never got it together to prepare.
Yeah.
Do you have any insight into that?
Yeah, such a great question. I love, man, I miss this community. I love that, Rabbi, you connect us with to have this conversations, these questions. I'm going to stay far out of the political responses there. I'll be a nice, neutral government kind of worker, supporter kind of person. But I will say this, one of the greatest qualities of our country is our resilience. And one of the challenges that we have is feeling like we're invincible and feeling like this won't happen to us and won't happen here. And I really worry about right now our public safety partners who, because I worked in police departments and in fire departments as an executive for many years. And I see right now that there's a level of invincibility and feeling like this won't happen to us as public safety workers. So I worry a lot about them and what they're going through right now. But I will say that our greatest attribute of being a resilient country and being able to make it through sometimes makes us fall a little bit behind the rest of the world that has had to deal with situations on their doorstep on a much more frequent basis. And so I think we're learning a lot from people all around the world and cultures and countries around the world right now. We're all taking a lot of notes and lessons. And I just hope that we can learn those quick enough and help each other by being open to the things from outside. Being cognitively diverse as a country to the international climate is very important.
So we have 2 minutes, Jacob. You have the last word. What's one thought looking forward that you want to leave us with?
Wow. Number one, a word of thanks. Again, I know I've a little bit of a broken record, but I can't tell you, and I did tell you, Rabbi, I mentioned to you that it's been really a challenge to not have the kids, engaged at the synagogue on Friday and Saturdays. But the wealth of connection and the amount of connection that you've been providing us daily is fueling our tanks here as a family. And what Rabbi Robin and Carl and Amy, what all of you and Helene and everyone is doing to keep our families going right now, please keep up that pace. Please don't pull back right now. This is the time to over communicate. This is the time to provide us as much connection as we can, because in all of our own ways, we're feeling very isolated and physically removed from each other. And sometimes for a lot of us, this is our forum to connect. So please, it's a lot of work for you and a lot of work for Helene and all the people that are orchestrating everything behind the scenes, but keep it up. For those of you that are running companies right now and organizations, over communicate. This is the time to use every channel that you can. I just filmed today with my CEO an interview. He's doing interview messages every Friday, all hands calls. We had 550 people on our all hands call that we were moderating, that I was moderating with the CEO. Over communicate, connect, make sure we're really staying in tune with our friends and family and our children and connecting with each other. We will, as a community, we will as a congregation, we will as a people get on the other side of this. We always have. Every single, I'm a student of disasters. I love studying what we can learn from crisis. Every disaster, we've made it through the other end and we've gone through a recovery process. I was there in Christchurch. They thought they'd never rebuild. there's a beautiful community sprouting from a flattened environment of 500,000 people. So we will get to the other side together, but we need to make sure we're looking out for each other, connecting in these ways. And I'm just incredibly grateful for what you and the synagogue community are doing to help our families through this.
Thank you, Jacob. Your words come from a place of your own hard lessons that you have been able to use to make the world better. And your reassurance that this time, which is a time of hard lessons, we will emerge from. So thank you for the evening. I thank all of our participants, which is well over 50 who participated tonight. Thank you. And to all, wishes of Shabbat Shalom and happy Pesach.